The thing about fixing broken pipes at 3 in the morning is that it gives you plenty of time to think about what else in your life might be leaking. I'm Will Travers, 37 years old, superintendent of a 40-unit high-rise in Brooklyn, and apparently engaged to a woman who thinks my job title comes with a side of doormat. I should have seen it coming when Riley started asking about networking events every Friday night. Event planner, she called herself, though most of her events seem to involve other people's money and her standing around looking pretty while holding a clipboard. "Will, you're embarrassing me," she hissed as we stood outside the Loft, some overpriced nightclub in Manhattan where the velvet rope might as well have been electrified for people like me. The bouncer looked at my work boots and flannel shirt like I'd tracked dog shit through his grandmother's kitchen. "I'm embarrassing you?" I kept my voice level, the way they taught us in the Army. Stay calm, assess the situation, identify the threat. "I'm the one paying for this cab ride, sweetheart." Riley's friends, Tara and Lisa, 2 carbon copies of every entitled princess I'd ever met, giggled behind their manicured hands. They'd been whispering all night, shooting looks at me like I was some charity case Riley had dragged along to feed. That's when he appeared. Dante Rizzo, 6 feet of Italian-American swagger in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The bouncer practically genuflected as he unhooked the rope. "Ladies," Dante's voice carried that practiced smoothness of a man who'd never heard the word no without a price tag attached. His eyes lingered on Riley, and I watched her posture change, straightening like a cat in heat. "Oh my God, you're Dante Rizzo," Tara squealed. "We love the Loft." "Appreciate that, beautiful." He pulled out his phone, fingers dancing across the screen. "You ladies should come by the VIP section next Friday. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Riley stepped forward, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "That sounds amazing. I'm Riley Martin. I do event planning around the city." "Event planning?" Dante's smile widened. "We should definitely talk business." He handed her his card, but his fingers lingered against hers just a beat too long. I cleared my throat. "Ready to head home, Rye?" That's when she said it, the words that would replay in my head for the next 6 months like a broken record. Riley turned to me, her face flushed with excitement and something that looked dangerously close to embarrassment. "You're not my husband, Will. You don't own me." The silence stretched between us like a live wire. Tara and Lisa exchanged glances. Dante raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the show. The bouncer pretended to study his clipboard. "You're absolutely right," I said finally. "I'm not your husband. Good thing, too." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her new friends and her new business contact. Behind me, I heard Tara's voice. "Girl, you are so bad." The cab ride home gave me 45 minutes to think, which was about 44 minutes too many. By the time I reached our building, my building, technically, since my name was the only one on the lease, I'd made my decision. I climbed the stairs to apartment 14F, keys jingling in my pocket. The keys to everything Riley thought she owned but had never actually paid for. I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. "You don't own my paycheck either. Lock's changed. Your stuff is in storage unit 247 on Atlantic Avenue. Paid through the end of the month. After that, it's not my problem. Will." I left the note on the kitchen counter, right next to the stack of bills she'd never opened, in the apartment she'd never contributed to, surrounded by furniture I'd bought with money I'd earned fixing other people's problems. Then I went to bed in my own place for the first time in 2 years. The beauty of being a building superintendent is that you learn to see systems, electrical, plumbing, security, and most importantly, financial. Every building is an ecosystem, and every tenant is either contributing to its health or draining its resources. Riley had been a drain for longer than I'd wanted to admit. Saturday morning, I sat in my office in the basement, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from every hallway camera with a stack of financial documents spread across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. My laptop screen showed the joint checking account, the one where my direct deposits had been feeding Riley's lifestyle for 24 months. First call, Chase Bank. "I need to remove an authorized user from my account," I told the customer service rep. "Riley Martin. No, she doesn't need to be present. It's my account." Click. Done. Riley's debit card would be declined by noon. Second call, Con Ed. "I need to remove someone from my utility account billing notifications." The electric bill that Riley claimed she helped with by occasionally remembering to flip the switch. Third call, Time Warner. Fourth call, cell phone company. By 10 a.m., I'd systematically removed Riley Martin from every financial system she'd never actually contributed to. The joint account showed a pattern that would make any forensic accountant weep. 2 years of my deposits, 0 of hers. Her contributions to household expenses were like unicorn sightings. Frequently claimed, never documented. My computer chimed with a new email. Bank statement from our My Savings account. I opened it and started laughing, the kind of bitter laugh that comes when you finally see the joke you've been living. Riley's contributions to our shared expenses over the past year, $847. My contributions, $34,200. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the credit monitoring alert that had arrived yesterday, buried in my spam folder. Someone had been checking my credit score, someone who wasn't me. I logged into my credit report, fingers moving across the keyboard with the methodical precision I'd learned as a spotter in the Army. Patience, observation, document everything. What I found made my blood pressure spike. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, 2 personal loans I'd never applied for, 1 line of credit at a casino in Atlantic City that I'd never visited. Total fraudulent debt, $85,000. All opened using my social security number, my address, and a forged signature that looked suspiciously like Riley's handwriting. I picked up my phone and dialed. Pete, it's Will. Can you cover the building for a few hours? I need to make some visits. Pete Kowalski had been working maintenance in Brooklyn buildings for 30 years. He'd seen every scam, every sob story, every creative way tenants found to avoid paying rent. Sure thing, boss. Everything okay? Just cleaning house. My first stop was the credit card company. The fraud department was surprisingly helpful when I showed up with my military ID, building superintendent license, and a folder full of documentation proving I'd never left New York State on the dates the Atlantic City charges were made. We'll need to file a police report, the investigator told me. This looks like identity theft. Already planning on it. Second stop, Atlantic City. The drive took 2 hours, which gave me plenty of time to think about Riley's sudden interest in girls' weekends over the past 6 months. The casino's security office was exactly what I expected. A windowless room full of monitors and bored-looking guards who'd seen every angle humanity had to offer. The head of security, a former cop named Rodriguez, pulled up the account information. Yeah, I remember her, he said, scrolling through transaction records. Blonde, always dressed nice, usually came in on weekends, started small, worked her way up to the high-limit tables, classic progression. How classic? Started with a few hundred, built up to 5-figure nights. When she started losing, she got desperate. That's when she applied for the credit line. He turned the monitor toward me. Using your information. The security footage showed Riley at a blackjack table, betting chips worth more than my monthly salary while Dante Rizzo sat beside her, whispering in her ear like a devil on her shoulder. The guy she's with? I said. Tell me about him. Rodriguez's expression hardened. Dante Rizzo owns the Loft nightclub in Manhattan, also runs a private lending operation for gamblers who've maxed out their casino credit. Very expensive money. How expensive? The kind that comes with collection visits. I drove back to Brooklyn with a clearer picture forming in my mind. Riley hadn't just betrayed me for another man, she'd betrayed me to cover her own ass. The gambling debts, the fraudulent credit cards, the sudden interest in networking events, it all led back to Dante Rizzo and his very expensive money. By the time I reached my building, I had a plan. I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon in my office using my master key access to review the building's security footage from the past 6 months. As superintendent, I had legitimate reasons to monitor the hallways, package theft, unauthorized visitors, maintenance issues. What I found was better than Christmas morning. Riley had been bringing Dante to my apartment, our apartment, for the past 3 months. The timestamp showed visits on weekdays when I was working other buildings, weekends when I was visiting my sister upstate. They'd been using my home like a hotel. I burned copies of everything onto 3 separate drives, uploaded backups to a secure cloud server, and printed hard copies of the most damaging evidence. Then I called Detective O'Hara. Mike O'Hara lived in apartment 8C with his wife and 2 kids. He'd been a tenant for 5 years, always paid rent on time, never complained about noise. He also happened to work financial crimes for the NYPD. Will, everything okay? Mike, I need to report identity theft and fraud. Can you meet me in my office? I think you're going to want to see this. An hour later, Detective O'Hara sat across from my desk, reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. Financial records, credit reports, casino security footage, building surveillance videos, the works. Jesus, Will, she really did a number on you. The question is, what can we do about it? O'Hara leaned back in his chair, studying the timeline I'd created. The identity theft is slam dunk. The casino fraud is federal, crosses state lines, but this Dante character, he tapped the surveillance photos. This looks like a loan sharking operation. That's organized crime territory. What do you need from me? Everything you've got, plus your willingness to wear a wire if he comes around looking for his money. I thought about Riley's dismissive voice outside the loft. You're not my husband. You don't own me. When do we start? Sunday morning brought the first test of my new reality. I was in my office, updating work orders and reviewing maintenance schedules when the building's front door buzzer started going off like a fire alarm. The intercom crackled to life. Will, it's me. The key isn't working. I looked at the security monitor showing the front entrance. Riley stood outside in last night's dress, makeup smeared, holding a purse that probably cost more than most people's rent. Behind her, a black Maserati idled at the curb. I pressed the intercom button. That's because I changed the locks. What? You can't do that? I live here. Check your lease agreement. Oh wait, you're not on it. The car door opened and Dante Rizzo stepped out, adjusting his jacket in that way men do when they're preparing for confrontation. He walked up to the entrance like he owned the sidewalk. We need to talk. His voice carried through the intercom with the kind of authority that came from never being told no. I'm listening. Face to face, man to man. I looked at the wire Detective O'Hara had given me yesterday, sitting in my desk drawer like a loaded gun. Come on up. Office is in the basement. I clipped the recording device inside my shirt pocket and activated the app on my phone. Every word would be captured, time-stamped, and automatically uploaded to O'Hara's secure server. They arrived 5 minutes later. Riley looked like she'd been crying, which might have affected me yesterday, but today just looked like another performance. Dante surveyed my office with the calculating gaze of a man pricing everything for resale value. Nice setup, he said, noting the security monitors, the filing cabinets, the wall-mounted toolboard. Very organized. I like to know what's happening in my building. Riley stepped forward, and I could smell the desperation rolling off her like cheap perfume. Will, we need to talk about this like adults. I made some mistakes, but we can work it out. Mistakes? I kept my voice level, professional. You mean the $85,000 in fraudulent debt you opened in my name? Dante's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He hadn't expected me to know the exact number. That's between you and her, he said. I'm just here about business. What kind of business? The kind where debts get paid on schedule. Dante moved closer to my desk, and I noticed the slight bulge under his left arm. See? Riley here owes me money. Significant money. Money she borrowed using certain guarantees. What kind of guarantees? Riley's voice cracked. Will, I told him you'd help. I told him we were engaged, that you'd understand. I understand perfectly. I stood up, moving around the desk to face Dante directly. You're a loan shark who preys on gamblers, and she's a fraud who used my identity to cover her debts. The question is, what exactly are you planning to do about it? Dante smiled, and it was like watching a snake unhinge its jaw. I think you misunderstand the situation. Riley guaranteed her debts with your name, your credit, your address. That makes you responsible. Show me the paperwork. This isn't about paperwork, friend. This is about honor, about keeping your word. I never gave my word, but your fiancée did, on your behalf. I felt the familiar calm that came before action, the same feeling I'd had in Afghanistan when spotting targets through a rifle scope. Everything slowed down, became crystal clear. Let me explain something to you, Dante. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne and see the gold caps on his teeth. I'm not responsible for her debts. I'm not responsible for her promises. And I'm sure as hell not responsible for whatever arrangement you two worked out while you were fucking in my apartment. Riley gasped. Dante's smile disappeared. Careful, Superintendent. You're talking about things you don't understand. I understand that you've been running a loan sharking operation out of the loft. I understand that you've been charging illegal interest rates to problem gamblers. And I understand that you've been using my home as your personal hotel. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I also understand that the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is very interested in meeting you. Dante's hand moved toward his jacket, but stopped when I held up my phone. This conversation is being recorded and transmitted in real time to Detective O'Hara at the 78th Precinct. If something happens to me, you'll have NYPD here in about 4 minutes. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Riley looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match that would determine her life. Finally, Dante straightened his jacket and stepped back. This isn't over. Yes, it is. After they left, I sat in my office and reviewed the recording. Clear audio, incriminating statements, and Dante's implicit threats all captured in high definition. I uploaded everything to O'Hara's server and made backup copies on 3 separate drives. Then I started planning phase 2. The building's security system was more sophisticated than most people realized. As superintendent, I had access to facial recognition software, motion tracking, and archived footage going back 18 months. What I'd shown O'Hara yesterday was just the beginning. I spent Sunday evening creating a comprehensive timeline of Riley and Dante's relationship using security footage, credit card records, and casino surveillance. The pattern was clear. Riley had started gambling 6 months ago, met Dante at the loft, and began using my identity to cover her losses when casino credit ran out. But there was something else in the footage, something I hadn't noticed before. Other women, different faces, but the same pattern. Well-dressed, desperate, accompanied by men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Dante Rizzo wasn't just running a simple loan sharking operation. He was running a systematic fraud scheme using problem gamblers to recruit identity theft victims. Monday morning, I called Detective O'Hara. "Mike, I think this is bigger than we thought." Tuesday brought rain and federal agents. I was replacing a broken faucet in apartment 12B when Mrs. Garza knocked on the door, her ancient face creased with worry. "Mijo, there are men in suits asking about you downstairs. They look like the police, but..." She made the sign of the cross. "They look too serious to be regular police." FBI. Had to be. I found them waiting in my office. 2 agents in dark suits who looked like they'd been ordered from the same catalog. The older one, Agent Martinez, had the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades chasing white-collar criminals. His partner, Agent Chen, looked young enough to be carded at restaurants. "Mr. Travers, we understand you've been in contact with Detective O'Hara regarding identity theft and fraud." "That's right. We'd like to discuss Dante Rizzo." For the next 2 hours, I walked them through everything: the fraudulent accounts, the casino footage, the building surveillance, the recorded conversation from Sunday. They took notes, asked questions, and occasionally exchanged glances that suggested they knew more about Dante than they were letting on. "How long has this been going on?" Agent Martinez asked. "The gambling started about 6 months ago. The identity theft began 3 months later." "No, Mr. Travers. How long has Dante Rizzo been operating his lending scheme?" I realized they weren't here because of my complaint. They were here because I'd stumbled into something much larger. "We've been building a case against Rizzo for 18 months, Agent Chen explained. "Loan sharking, money laundering, identity theft, extortion. Your evidence fills in some significant gaps." "What kind of gaps?" "The kind that show a pattern of systematic fraud involving dozens of victims." Martinez pulled out a tablet and showed me a map of New York City dotted with red pins. "Each pin represents a victim of identity theft connected to Rizzo's operation. Your fiancée isn't unique. She's part of a network." The scope was staggering. Rizzo had been recruiting problem gamblers, offering them credit, then forcing them to commit identity theft when they couldn't pay. The victims were usually spouses, family members, or romantic partners with good credit and stable incomes. "What do you need from me?" "We need you to help us catch him in the act." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would continue my normal routine while wearing recording equipment. When Rizzo inevitably returned to collect his money, we'd capture everything: threats, extortion, and hopefully enough evidence to connect him to the broader fraud scheme. "What about Riley?" "She'll be arrested when we take down Rizzo. Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy. She's looking at serious federal time." I thought about that for a moment. 6 months ago, I'd been planning to propose to Riley Martin. Now I was helping federal agents build a case that would send her to prison. "When do we start?" They fitted me with a new recording device, more sophisticated than O'Hara's equipment. This one would capture audio and video, transmit in real time, and automatically alert law enforcement if it detected signs of physical distress. "Rizzo will be back," Agent Martinez said. "Men like him don't walk away from $85,000. He was right. Wednesday evening, I was updating the building's maintenance log when the front door buzzer rang. The security monitor showed Dante Rizzo and 2 men I didn't recognize, both built like refrigerators with anger management issues. "Superintendent Travers, we need to finish our conversation." I buzzed them in, activated my recording equipment, and waited. They arrived in my office like a storm front, filling the small space with barely contained violence. Dante had traded his expensive suit for jeans and a leather jacket, but he still carried himself like royalty slumming in the peasant quarters. "I've been thinking about our talk," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "About what?" "About responsibility. About consequences." He gestured to his companions, who positioned themselves near the door like bookends. "See, I'm a businessman. I provide services to people who need them. When those people don't pay, it affects my ability to provide services to others. That's between you and them. But it's not, is it? Because Riley used your name, your credit, your identity to guarantee her debts. In my business, that makes you responsible. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my hands visible and my voice steady. In my business, that makes her a criminal. Your business? Dante laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You fix toilets and change light bulbs. I run a multi-million-dollar operation. We're not in the same league. You're right. I'm legitimate. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. One of Dante's men shifted his weight, hand moving toward his jacket. The other cracked his knuckles like he was warming up for a workout. Let me explain how this works, Dante continued, his voice taking on the patient tone of a teacher addressing a slow student. Riley owes me $85,000, plus interest, plus penalties for late payment, plus additional fees for the inconvenience you've caused me. How much additional fees? Let's call it an even 100,000, I whistled low. That's a lot of money for a guy who fixes toilets. It's amazing how creative people get when they are properly motivated. What kind of creativity are we talking about? Dante smiled, and I could see why Riley had been attracted to him. He had the kind of dangerous charisma that made smart women do stupid things. Well, you could take out a loan against this building, or maybe liquidate some assets. I hear building superintendents sometimes have access to opportunities. You mean steal from the tenants? I mean find creative solutions to pressing problems. I stood up slowly, hands still visible. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to commit crimes to pay off debts that my ex-fiancée incurred while committing identity theft to cover gambling losses at your illegal operation. I want you to take responsibility for your woman's obligations. She's not my woman anymore. That's unfortunate, because her obligations didn't end when your relationship did. The threat was clear, unambiguous, and completely recorded. I could practically hear Agent Martinez cheering from wherever he was monitoring this conversation. And if I refuse, then we'll have to explore other options. What kind of options? Dante stood up, buttoning his jacket with the casual precision of a man who'd made this speech before. This is a nice building. Good tenants, regular income, solid construction. It would be a shame if something happened to compromise its structural integrity. Are you threatening my building? I'm explaining the consequences of poor decision-making. He headed toward the door, his men following like trained dogs. At the threshold, he turned back. You have 1 week to find the money. After that, I start charging interest on the inconvenience. After they left, I sat in my office and waited for my hands to stop shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Dante Rizzo had just threatened my building, my tenants, my livelihood. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I picked up my phone and called Agent Martinez. We got everything, I said. When do we take him down? Soon. Very soon. The raid on the loft happened on a Friday night, which Agent Martinez explained was tactically optimal. Maximum crowd, maximum chaos, maximum evidence of ongoing criminal activity. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd convinced them to let me observe from the surveillance van parked across the street. After months of being Dante Rizzo's target, I wanted to see his empire fall. The loft occupied the top 3 floors of a converted warehouse in Soho, with a street-level entrance guarded by velvet ropes and bouncers, who looked like they moonlighted as debt collectors, which, according to the FBI's intelligence, they probably did. Teams in position? Agent Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. Financial crimes, organized crime, and NYPD are coordinating. We go in 60 seconds. I watched through the van's tinted windows as federal agents took positions around the building. They'd been planning this for weeks, using my evidence to obtain warrants for Rizzo's business records, financial accounts, and personal assets. This is bigger than just your case, Agent Chen had explained during our final briefing. Rizzo's operation extends into money laundering, drug trafficking, and human trafficking. Your identity theft evidence was the key that unlocked everything else. The raid began at exactly 11:47 p.m. FBI agents swarmed the entrance while NYPD units blocked traffic on both ends of the street. Inside the club, I could see strobing lights and confused crowds as federal agents announced themselves over the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the FBI. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of law enforcement officers. The chaos was beautiful. Through the surveillance equipment, I watched Dante Rizzo's face transform from confusion to recognition to pure panic as he realized what was happening. He tried to reach the emergency exit, but Agent Martinez was waiting for him with handcuffs and a very satisfied expression. Dante Rizzo, you're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, extortion, and operating an illegal gambling enterprise. But the real prize wasn't Rizzo. It was his office. The FBI's computer crimes unit had been waiting months for legal access to Rizzo's files, and they hit the jackpot. Financial records, customer lists, loan documents, and most importantly, a database containing the personal information of hundreds of identity theft victims. Riley's information was there, along with detailed records of her gambling losses, loan payments, and the fraudulent accounts she'd opened using my identity. But she wasn't alone. The database contained similar information for nearly 300 other victims. Jesus, Agent Chen muttered as he scrolled through the files. This guy was running a fraud factory. The scope was staggering. Rizzo had been systematically targeting problem gamblers, offering them credit, then forcing them to recruit identity theft victims when they couldn't pay. The victims were usually spouses, family members, or romantic partners with good credit and stable incomes. "Where's Riley?" I asked. "Being arrested at her friend Tara's apartment," Agent Martinez replied, along with Tara and Lisa. Turns out they were all part of the recruitment network. That explained the whispered conversations, the knowing looks, the way they'd all encouraged Riley's relationship with Rizzo. They hadn't been friends, they'd been accomplices. The financial evidence was devastating. Riley had opened 7 fraudulent credit accounts using my information, taken out 3 personal loans, and established 2 lines of credit at different casinos. The total debt was actually higher than I'd thought, nearly $120,000. But the paper trail also revealed something else. Riley had been planning this for months before she'd even met Rizzo. The first fraudulent account was opened 8 months ago, 2 weeks after I'd mentioned getting a promotion to regional supervisor. She hadn't fallen into crime because of gambling addiction or bad influences. She'd targeted me specifically because of my job, my income, and my access to building management resources. "She was never your fiancée," Agent Martinez said, reading over my shoulder. "She was always a criminal who saw you as a mark." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Everything, the relationship, the engagement, the shared apartment, had been a long-term fraud scheme. Riley Martin had never loved me. She'd been stealing from me since the day we met. What happens now? Now we process the evidence, file charges, and let the justice system work. The justice system worked faster than I'd expected. Riley Martin was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Federal charges with mandatory minimum sentences, and no possibility of plea bargaining down to misdemeanors. Dante Rizzo faced racketeering charges under the RICO Act, along with money laundering, extortion, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. The prosecutors were seeking a 20-year sentence. Tara and Lisa were charged as co-conspirators, facing their own fraud and identity theft charges. But the most satisfying part was the asset forfeiture. Under federal law, any property purchased with proceeds from criminal activity could be seized by the government. Rizzo's nightclub, his cars, his apartments, his bank accounts, everything was frozen pending criminal trial. More importantly, the fraudulent debts opened in my name were voided, and I was entitled to restitution for damages. The court appointed a victim's advocate to help me navigate the financial recovery process. "You're looking at full credit restoration," the advocate explained, "plus monetary compensation for emotional distress, lost opportunities, and punitive damages." "How much monetary compensation?" "Potentially significant. The government recovered over $12 million in assets from Rizzo's operation. Victim compensation will be substantial." I thought about that as I walked back to my building. 6 months ago, I'd been a working-class guy engaged to a woman who was slowly destroying my financial future. Now I was a federal witness in a major organized crime case, with the possibility of a substantial financial settlement. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. The trial began on a Tuesday in February in the federal courthouse in downtown Brooklyn. I'd been dreading this moment for months, facing Riley across a courtroom, reliving the betrayal, having my private life dissected by lawyers and strangers. Instead, it was the most satisfying day I'd had in years. Riley looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, diminished somehow, like a balloon slowly losing air. The confident woman who dismissed me outside the loft had been replaced by someone who kept her eyes fixed on the defense table and flinched every time the prosecutor mentioned her name. The defendant, Riley Martin, systematically exploited her romantic relationship with Will Travers to commit identity theft on an unprecedented scale, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Goldman told the jury. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was a calculated long-term fraud scheme designed to steal Mr. Travers' financial future. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations, testimony from other victims. The prosecution painted a picture of Riley as a predator who'd specifically targeted me because of my job stability and credit rating. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant didn't just steal money, she stole trust, security, and peace of mind from a man who loved her. Riley's defense attorney tried to portray her as a victim of Dante Rizzo's manipulation, a gambling addict who'd been coerced into criminal activity. It might have worked if the evidence hadn't shown her opening fraudulent accounts months before she'd ever met Rizzo. The most damaging testimony came from Tara Williams, Riley's former friend who'd agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Riley told me she was going to milk this guy for everything he was worth. Tara testified. She said he was stupid, that he'd never figure it out because he was just a maintenance worker. Did she ever express genuine affection for Mr. Travers? She called him her retirement plan. She said she was going to get engaged, max out his credit, then disappear. I watched Riley's face as her former friend destroyed any pretense that our relationship had been real. She kept her expression neutral, but I could see the rage building behind her eyes. Dante Rizzo's trial was running concurrently in another courtroom, and the evidence there was even more devastating. The FBI had uncovered a criminal enterprise that had stolen over $50 million through identity theft, loan sharking, and money laundering. But the real victory came during the asset recovery phase. Under federal forfeiture laws, victims of organized crime are entitled to compensation from seized criminal assets. Rizzo's entire empire, the loft, his cars, his real estate, his bank accounts, was liquidated to pay restitution to his victims. My share was $340,000. It's not just compensation for the fraudulent debts, the victim's advocate explained. It's damages for emotional distress, credit repair costs, legal fees, and punitive damages for the systematic nature of the fraud. $340,000. More money than I'd ever imagined having. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching Riley's world collapse in real time. Her event planning business, which had never been profitable anyway, folded when news of her arrest became public. Her friends abandoned her. Her family disowned her. Her apartment was seized as evidence of criminal activity. The woman who told me, "You're not my husband, you don't own me," was now a federal prisoner facing 8 to 12 years in prison. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in March. I took a personal day to attend. Riley Martin, you have been found guilty of identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Judge Patricia Hawkins announced. These are serious crimes that have caused substantial harm to your victim and to the community. Riley's attorney made a final plea for leniency, citing her cooperation with authorities and her expression of remorse. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, complete with tears and trembling voice. Your Honor, Ms. Martin deeply regrets her actions and the pain she has caused. She asks for the court's mercy and the opportunity to make amends. Judge Hawkins wasn't impressed. Ms. Martin, your crimes were not the result of desperation or addiction. They were the result of calculated greed and callous disregard for others. You systematically exploited a position of trust to steal from someone who loved you. The court finds no mitigating factors that would justify a departure from federal sentencing guidelines. Riley Martin, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution to your victim in the amount of $340,000, which will be satisfied through the asset forfeiture recovery. Riley finally looked at me as the marshals prepared to lead her away. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw the real woman underneath, angry, entitled, and completely unrepentant. This isn't over, she mouthed silently. I smiled and mouthed back, yes, it is. Dante Rizzo received 25 years under the RICO Act. Tara Williams got 3 years. Lisa Chen got 5 years. The entire criminal network that had targeted me was dismantled, prosecuted, and imprisoned. Justice, it turned out, was more satisfying than revenge. 6 months after the trial, I was promoted to Regional Security Director for Metropolitan Property Management, overseeing security operations for 200 buildings across Brooklyn and Queens. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, a company car, and the satisfaction of knowing that my experience as a crime victim had made me uniquely qualified to protect others. My first initiative was implementing comprehensive tenant protection protocols, background checks for all romantic partners with building access, financial monitoring systems to detect identity theft, and mandatory reporting procedures for suspicious activity. You're basically creating a fortress, Pete observed as he helped me install new security equipment in the main office. I'm creating accountability, I corrected. People need to know there are consequences for their actions. The new apartment was in a building I managed in Park Slope, a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, and a view of Prospect Park. It was twice the size of my old place and cost half as much, thanks to my employee discount and the substantial down payment I'd made with my restitution money. I'd also paid off my truck, established a retirement account, and set aside funds for the online criminal justice degree I was pursuing through John Jay College. The woman who tried to steal my future had inadvertently funded a better one. The letters from Riley started arriving in July. The first one was delivered to my old building, forwarded by Mrs. Garza with a note. "Mijo, this woman keeps writing to you. Should I throw them away?" I told her to return them marked addressee unknown. But Riley was persistent. She found my new address, my work address, even tried sending letters through my sister upstate. Each one followed the same pattern: apologies, explanations, promises to make amends, pleas for forgiveness. "I know I hurt you, but what we had was real." One letter read, "I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. When I get out, we can start over." I returned them all unopened. The phone calls started in August. Riley had apparently earned telephone privileges and somehow obtained my new number. I blocked her calls, but she kept trying from different numbers. Other inmates' accounts, prison payphones, even her lawyer's office. I changed my number twice before finally getting a restraining order that prohibited any contact whatsoever. The final confrontation came in September. I was leaving work on a Friday evening when I spotted a familiar figure waiting by my car. Tara Williams, recently released from federal prison, looking like she'd aged a decade in 3 years. "Will, can we talk?" "We have nothing to discuss." "It's about Riley. She's not handling prison well. She keeps talking about you, about how you destroyed her life." I unlocked my car and threw my briefcase in the back seat. "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped enabling it." "She's obsessed with you. The other inmates think she's losing it. She keeps saying she's going to make you pay when she gets out." I turned to face Tara directly. "Let me be very clear about something. Riley Martin chose to commit crimes. Riley Martin chose to steal from me. Riley Martin chose to betray my trust. Every consequence she's facing is the direct result of her own actions. But there's no but. She made her choices, and now she's living with the results. That's how the world works for everyone else, and it's how it works for her." Tara looked like she wanted to say more, but something in my expression stopped her. She nodded slowly and walked away. I drove home through the Friday evening traffic, thinking about consequences and choices. Riley was serving 10 years in federal prison because she'd chosen to commit federal crimes. Dante Rizzo was serving 25 years because he'd chosen to run a criminal enterprise. Tara Williams had served 3 years because she'd chosen to participate in identity theft. I was living in a beautiful apartment, working a job I loved, and building a future I'd never imagined because I'd chosen to fight back instead of being a victim. The universe, it seemed, had a very clear sense of justice after all. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking Prospect Park, drinking a beer and reviewing the quarterly security reports for my buildings. Crime was down 18% across my portfolio, tenant satisfaction was up, and I'd identified and prevented 3 separate fraud attempts in the past month. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective O'Hara. "Saw the news about your promotion? Drinks to celebrate?" I texted back, "Absolutely. I'm buying." As the sun set over Brooklyn, I thought about the woman who told me I wasn't her husband, that I didn't own her. She'd been right. I'd never owned her, but I'd never needed to. I'd always owned something much more valuable: my own life, my own choices, and my own future. Riley Martin had tried to steal that from me, and she'd failed spectacularly. Now she was discovering what it felt like to have someone else control every aspect of her existence. What time she woke up, what she ate, where she went, who she talked to. The irony was perfect. I finished my beer, gathered my reports, and went inside to start planning next week's security upgrades. There was always more work to do, more people to protect, more systems to improve. And somewhere in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, Riley Martin was learning that consequences, unlike forgiveness, don't require anyone else's permission.